My daughter called me on a Wednesday evening in April. I was in the kitchen making dinner, nothing dramatic, pasta, a glass of wine, the particular quiet of a house that has held a family for 30 years and now mostly holds one person. I saw her name on my phone and I picked up the way I always do. Warm, ready. Her mother. She said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about this summer." I said, "Of course, what's going on?" She said, "We've been thinking, and we really feel, Marcus and I both feel, that this summer it would be better if you didn't come to the lake house." I stood very still at my stove. "Better for who?" I said. "For everyone. Marcus thinks it's important for our family to have the space. He feels like when you're there, it changes the dynamic. And honestly, we've been talking about whether it makes more sense for the lake house to just be for us, for our family going forward. Marcus thinks we should make it more of a permanent arrangement." Marcus thinks? Marcus thinks. Marcus, who had been in my daughter's life for 6 years, married to her for 4, who had never once put a dollar toward the house I built with money I saved across 32 years of working, Marcus thinks it makes more sense for the lake house to be theirs going forward. I built that house. I designed it. I hired the contractor. I signed the mortgage, made every payment, chose every fixture and every beam and every pane of glass in the windows that face the water. I built it for our family. Because after my husband Thomas passed and the children grew up and the house got quiet, the lake house was the thing that gave us a place to come together. I built it as an invitation, and my daughter's husband had looked at the invitation and decided it was a deed of ownership. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I said, "Let me think about that, sweetheart. I'll call you back." I hung up. I looked at my pasta. I turned off the burner, and I called my real estate attorney, because the deed to that lake house was in my name, and it would stay in my name until I decided otherwise. And I had just decided otherwise. What I did before June 24th, quietly, legally, completely, is the reason you're going to stay for the next 70 minutes. My name is Ruth. I'm 67 years old. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the house where I raised my 2 children. I'm a retired school administrator. 32 years, district level, curriculum, and budget. I understand systems. I understand how resources flow and who controls them, and what happens when control is assumed rather than granted. That background matters to this story more than you might expect. I have 2 children. My son, Paul, is 41. He lives in Portland with his wife and their 2 boys and calls every Sunday without fail and is, in the specific and uncomplicated way of some people, exactly who he appears to be. My daughter, Vivian, is 38. She lives 40 minutes from me, which has always felt the right distance. Close enough for dinner, far enough for boundaries. She is bright, funny, capable in ways she doesn't always give herself credit for. She married Marcus 4 years ago. I want to be careful about how I describe Marcus because I have spent a significant amount of therapy time making sure I am accurate rather than simply hostile. Marcus is not a bad person. He is a person with a very specific relationship to money and property, specifically other people's money and other people's property, that has taken several years to become fully legible to me. He earns a reasonable income in sales. He spends above that income consistently. He has a quality that I have heard described as big picture thinking, and that I would describe as an inability to concern himself with the details of how things actually work, including who paid for them. He refers to the lake house as our place in conversations I have been present for. He has never been present for a mortgage payment. The lake house. Let me tell you about the lake house. I bought the land 17 years ago, 2 years after Thomas died. An acre and a half on a lake in Michigan. Not a grand lake, not a resort lake, a working lake where people fish on Saturday mornings and the kids learn to swim off old wooden docks. The kind of lake where people have been going for generations and the properties have histories. I bought it because Thomas and I had always talked about having a place on water. We had planned it, saved toward it, imagined it in the specific, detailed way of two people who build things together in their minds. We had a whole picture of it. He died before we could do it. I did it anyway. I paid the first 4 years of saving the down payment on top of the land cost. I did it on a school administrator's salary, cutting what could be cut, working summer programs for supplemental income, not taking vacations that cost money because the lake house was where I was going to vacation for the rest of my life. I hired a contractor who had worked in that area for 30 years and who built it the way I wanted. Simple, solid, nothing that required showing off. 3 bedrooms, a screened porch, a dock that reaches the right depth for swimming, a kitchen that works, a living room with a fireplace and windows facing the water. I finished paying the mortgage 6 years ago. I have no debt on it. The deed is in my name alone. I paid for every stick of it. And for 12 years, it has been the place where our family came together. Summers, long weekends, Thanksgiving when the weather was still warm enough. Paul's boys learned to swim there. Vivian brought Marcus there for the first time before they were engaged. I have watched sunrises from that screened porch more mornings than I can count. It was always an invitation. Marcus read it as an inheritance. Those are not the same thing. The shift happened gradually, the way most shifts in family dynamics happen, not with a declaration, but with a series of small adjustments that each seemed reasonable until they accumulated into something that wasn't. The first summer after Marcus and Vivian married, they stayed at the lake house for 3 weeks. I was there for one of those weeks, and it was fine. Good, even. Marcus was charming in a way that social situations bring out in him, and he and Paul got along, and the boys were young enough that the lake felt magical to them, and it was a good summer. The second summer, Marcus suggested, and I want to be precise about the word because it was very much a suggestion rather than a request, that it might be nice to have their own weeks at the lake, private family time, without others around. He said it in a way that made it sound like a preference for intimacy rather than a preference for exclusion. I said, of course, whatever works for everyone. And I began, without naming it, to schedule around them. By the third summer, they had taken the month of July, not formally assigned, just gradually established through the accumulating weight of plans made and schedules built around the assumption that July was theirs. I started going in June and in August. By the fourth summer, the summer before the April phone call, Marcus had begun making small changes to the house. Not structural, cosmetic mostly. A rug replaced, a set of towels that appeared that I did not purchase, a key holder by the door with hooks labeled with their family name. Their family name, not mine. I noticed. I said nothing. That was my mistake, looking back. Not the specific instances. Any of them was small enough to dismiss, but the pattern. I should have named the pattern. I should have said early and clearly, "This is my house. I am glad you love it. Your love for it does not change whose it is." I didn't say it. I told myself it was generosity, that I was sharing without conditions, that the mark of a mother who had built something was that she could hold it with open hands. Open hands and closed eyes, it turned out. Because what Marcus was building, slowly and without any apparent awareness that he was doing something worth questioning, was a sense of ownership that had no legal basis, but that had, through years of unchallenged assumption, begun to feel to him entirely natural. And then his wife, my daughter, who loves me and who had also been slowly shaped by 6 years of living inside Marcus's relationship to the world, made the April phone call. Marcus thinks we should make it more of a permanent arrangement. Have you ever had someone tell you what they think belongs to them, calmly, reasonably, as though the claim were self-evidently valid? Drop it in the comments, because I think many of us have sat across from that quality at a family dinner table and not had the words for it in the moment. I called Paul on Thursday morning. Not to vent, I am not a venter. I called because Paul is the person in my family whose read on a situation I trust most, and because what I was considering doing required me to have a clear understanding of how it would land. Paul picked up on the second ring. I told him about Vivian's call. All of it. The summer exclusion, Marcus's sense of the house going forward, the permanent arrangement language. Paul was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She actually said that? Marcus thinks it should be theirs going forward?" Those were essentially the words. Another pause. "Mom, it's your house." "I know. You built it. You paid for it. Your name is on the deed. What exactly does Marcus think entitles—" He stopped. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call my attorney," I said. Silence. "The real estate attorney?" "Yes." "You're going to sell it?" It wasn't a question. "I'm considering it," I said. "Mom." "Paul." "Vivian is going to—" "Vivian called me on Wednesday evening and told me not to come to the house I built because her husband has decided it should be theirs going forward. I love your sister. I love her very much. What she said to me it was not right, Paul. And I've been spending 2 days sitting with whether there's a version of this where I absorb it and it doesn't cost me something real. And there isn't." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Not, "Don't do it," not, "Think about this more," not, "Vivian didn't mean it the way it sounded." "What do you need from me?" I said, "I need you to know what I'm doing and why, and I need you to trust that I'm not doing it out of anger." "I know you're not," he said. "I built that house as an invitation for our family, for all of us. The moment it stops being an invitation and starts being an asset someone else is planning to claim, it's not doing what I built it to do." "Okay," Paul said. "Okay?" "Mom, you built it. You own it. You get to decide what happens to it." He said it the way I needed it said, not with drama, just clearly, as a fact. I thanked him. I called my attorney. Right here. My attorney's name is Ellen. She has handled my real estate matters for 15 years. She knows the lake house. She was at the closing when I paid off the mortgage, and she said at the time, "Ruth, that's a great day." I called her on a Thursday afternoon, and I explained the situation in the organized, factual way that 32 years of school administration had trained me to present information. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. "What would you like to do?" I told her. She said, "I can have the listing arrangement ready by end of week. What's your timeline?" I said, "I want it sold before June 24th. June 24th was the date Marcus and Vivian had planned to arrive for the summer. Ellen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll make some calls." Before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the offer, the closing, the phone call from Vivian when she found out, I want to ask you something. If someone you loved, someone you had given enormous amounts of yourself to over years, called you and told you not to come to a place you had built with your own hands, your own money, your own labor, what would you have done? Would you have accepted it? Would you have confronted them? Or would you have done what I did, said, "Let me think about that," and then called your attorney? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe right now before I tell you the rest, because I make a new story like this every single week about women who built things, about families who forget who did the building, and about what happens when those women quietly exercise the authority that the deed in their name has always given them. Subscribe. and then stay, because the offer came in faster than anyone expected. Ellen called me 11 days after our conversation. She had listed the property quietly, not on the public MLS immediately, but through her network of buyers who were actively looking for lake properties in that area. She had received 3 expressions of interest within a week. The strongest came from a couple in their early 60s, recently retired, their own children grown, specifically looking for a lake property they could use year-round. Ellen described them to me as the kind of buyers who will love it the way you loved it. The offer came in at $382,000. The lake house had a market value that had appreciated considerably since I built it. I had paid far less for the land and construction, and the regional lake property market had grown significantly over 17 years. The offer was solid, within range of what Ellen had told me to expect. I sat with it for one evening. I thought about the screened porch, the dock, the particular quality of morning light on that lake, the way it comes through the trees on the east side of the property and hits the water at an angle that makes everything look like something you'd want to paint. I thought about Thomas, about the house we'd planned together, about building it anyway after he was gone. I thought about Vivian's voice on a Wednesday evening. Marcus thinks it makes more sense for the lake house to just be for us going forward. I called Ellen. I said, accept it. She said, do you want me to set a closing date? I said, before June 24th. She said, that's tight, but doable. The closing was scheduled for June 17th. I did not tell Vivian. I did not tell Marcus. I thought carefully about whether I should, whether there was an obligation to inform them before the sale closed. I consulted Ellen, who confirmed that I had no legal obligation whatsoever. The property was mine. The deed was in my name alone, and my right to sell it was absolute and unconditional. There was no legal obligation. There was a question of what kind of mother and person I wanted to be. I decided that Vivian had made her choice about communication on a Wednesday evening in April, and that I would make mine about what to communicate and when. I sent her a letter. Not an email, a letter. Printed, signed, mailed on a Monday, time to arrive before the closing. It said, Vivian, I've thought carefully about our conversation in April and about the lake house. I've decided to sell it. The closing is scheduled for June 17th. I want you to understand why. I built that house as an invitation to our family, to the place where we could come together after your father died. It was never meant to be owned by anyone other than me, and it was never meant to exclude anyone from our family. When you called and told me not to come this summer and told me that Marcus felt it should be yours going forward, you described an arrangement that had nothing to do with the house I built and everything to do with an assumption I had never made and never intended to make. I love you. I will always be your mother. But the lake house was mine to give, and since it has been treated as something already taken, I have decided to sell it instead. The proceeds are mine. I'll use them as I see fit. I look forward to talking when you're ready. Mom. I sealed it, I mailed it, and then I went for a walk. Vivian received the letter on a Thursday. She called on Thursday evening. I picked up. She was not crying. She was the voice she uses when she is trying very hard to sound reasonable while feeling something that is not reasonable, which is a voice I know well because it is a voice I taught her, the voice of a woman managing herself in a high-stakes moment. Mom, I got your letter. I know. You're selling the lake house. I sold it. The closing is June 17th. A pause. Without telling us. I sent a letter before the closing. That's not... Mom, we had plans. We had the whole summer planned around being there. Vivian, you called me in April and told me not to come. I didn't say we were taking it. You said Marcus felt it should be yours going forward. That's a claim of ownership on a house you don't own. Silence. He didn't mean it like that. Then what did he mean? Longer silence. Mom, This feels really extreme. Does it? I said. Because from where I'm sitting, extreme is being told not to come to a house I built. Selling it is just a real estate transaction. I could hear her breath change. I know you're hurt, she said. I know I should have said it differently. But selling it? Vivian, I want to say something and I need you to hear it without responding immediately. Pause. The lake house was mine, not ours, mine. I built it after your father died with money I saved for 4 years. I paid the mortgage for 11 years before it was paid off. My name was and is the only name on the deed. You and Marcus have been guests, wonderful, welcome guests, but guests, nothing. Marcus describing it as something that should be yours going forward was not a conversation he had the standing to have, and you delivering that message to me, as though the conclusion were reasonable, told me something about how the house had come to be understood in your household. Mom, I am not punishing you. I am exercising a right I have always had. I am also telling you that the version of our family where I make myself smaller so that Marcus can feel bigger is over. Not because I don't love you, because I've spent too many years watching open hands get mistaken for empty ones. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "What are we going to do about the summer?" I said, "We'll figure out the summer. There are other places to gather. There are always other places. What matters is whether the people want to gather." She didn't say anything. "Do you?" I said. "Yes," she said. "Mom, yes." "Then we'll be fine," I said. Marcus called the next morning. I did not pick up. He left a voicemail. It was 11 minutes long, which tells you something about Marcus. He expressed in 11 minutes his sense of unfairness, his feeling that decisions had been made without proper consultation, his view that the sale would affect the children, and I want to be precise about this because I think it captures something essential about who Marcus is, his concern about what the property might have been worth if they'd waited longer, what it might have been worth. A property he had never paid a cent toward. I listened to the voicemail once. I did not return the call. I sent him a text. 4 words. "It was not yours." He did not respond. The closing happened on June 17th. The buyers, Susan and Gerald, the retired couple Ellen had described, signed their papers and shook my hand in the conference room. And Susan said, "We've been looking for a place like this for 3 years. We can't wait to spend the summer there." I smiled and said, "I hope it brings you everything it brought me." I drove home. I sat on my own porch in Cincinnati and watched my neighbor's garden and drank a cup of tea. The lake house proceeds, net of the transaction costs, were transferred to my account 4 business days later. I had already spoken to my financial advisor. I had already begun planning what to do with the money. Some of it will go to Paul's Boys, a college fund I had been considering and was now in a position to establish formally, not because of what happened, but because I could, and because watching Thomas's grandsons grow up and having something concrete to contribute to their futures is exactly the kind of thing Thomas would have loved. The rest I am sitting with. My financial advisor has given me several options. I am in no hurry. The lake house is someone else's now. I am, against all expectation, at peace with that. Paul called me the day after the closing. "How do you feel?" "Lighter," I said, which surprises me. I thought I'd feel the loss of it more. "You spent 17 years being generous with it," he said. "That's not nothing. But you were the only one who understood what it was." "Susan and Gerald will understand," I said. "Yes," he said. "I think they will." My sister-in-law, Thomas's youngest sister, a woman named Bev, who has known me since I was 29 and who has a directness I have always valued, called me the week after the closing. She had heard from Paul. She said, "I need you to know something." "What?" "Thomas would have sold it faster." I laughed. "Real, full, the kind that comes from somewhere deep." "You think so?" Ruth. That man did not build things to watch other people claim them. He built things to give them to people who understood what they were. The moment Marcus said, going forward, Thomas would have had Ellen on the phone that same night. I waited until morning, I said. You were always more patient than him, Bev said. That's not a criticism, it's a fact. But you got there. Has anyone ever been that person for you? The one who said the thing that named what you needed named? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I want to tell you about Vivian because I think her arc in the story matters as much as mine. We did not speak for about 3 weeks after the closing. Not a formal silence, neither of us declared it, we just each gave the other time. She called on the first Sunday in July, not with Marcus's voice in the background, just her. She talked for a long time, about Marcus, about the years of the lake house, about the moment she had called me in April and what had been in her mind when she did. She said she had known, even as she was saying the words, that something was wrong with the call. She said she had been telling herself it was just a conversation about summer plans, and some part of her had known it was more than that. I should have pushed back, she said, when Marcus talked about it being ours going forward. I should have said, that's not ours to decide, but I'd been inside his way of thinking about it for long enough that I had stopped noticing where the line was. I listened. I did not say, yes, you should have. I did not say, I know you knew it was wrong. I said, tell me what you want things to look like now. She told me. It was, in its essentials, what I wanted too. A real relationship. Honest. Without the slow management of recent years, without Marcus's assumptions sitting between us like furniture nobody admitted was there. We had dinner 3 weeks after that call. Just the two of us, at a restaurant she chose, and we talked for 3 hours about things that had nothing to do with the lake house. About her work, about mine, about her father, about the years when she was small and I was figuring out how to be a mother and a person simultaneously. At the end of dinner, she said, I'm sorry, Mom. I said, I know. Are we okay? We're getting there, I said, which is the honest answer, and I think honest is what we need to be now. She nodded. Yeah, she said. I think so too. It is 4 months since the closing. I have not been to Michigan this summer. I thought I might feel the absence of it more than I do. Some mornings I think about the screened porch, the way the light came in, the particular sound the dock made when the water was up. I let myself feel it. And then I make my coffee and sit in my own house, which is also mine, which nobody is planning to claim, and I am fine. More than fine. I have been in therapy for 2 years. I started after Thomas's death anniversary, during a year when I understood that grief has a long tail and that I had been managing it rather than processing it. My therapist, Dr. Moore, said something during one of our sessions about the lake house that I want to share because I think it's the most accurate thing anyone has said about all of this. She said, you built that house as a love letter to Thomas, and then you spent years trying to make sure everyone around you understood what it was. When it became clear that one person in the family had read it as a bill of sale, you took it back. That's not loss. That's authorship. Authorship. I built a thing. I controlled what happened to it. When the terms of its use were misrepresented in a way that fundamentally contradicted why I built it, I reasserted the authority I had always had. That is not revenge. It is clarity. I have spent 67 years being clear about what I build and why I build it and for whom. The lake house was the last test of that clarity. I passed it later than I should have and earlier than I feared I might. The money from the sale is sitting in accounts that will matter. Paul's boys will go to college without the specific, particular anxiety of not knowing how. That feels right. Thomas would recognize that use. He'd think about it the way he thought about everything that mattered, practically, with love, for the long term. I want to say something to you before we close. If you have built something, a house, a business, a savings account, a life, anything that cost you time and discipline and the specific sacrifice of delayed gratification, I want you to hear this. The thing you built is yours, not as a technicality, not as a legal footnote. Yours, in the full, human, meaningful sense. The people who love you are welcome to enjoy it, welcome to share it, welcome to make memories in it. They are not welcome to assume it. And the moment someone in your family begins speaking about what you built as though their relationship to you transfers ownership, as though love is a deed, you are allowed to correct that understanding. Not with anger, not with punishment, with the same clarity and the same authority with which you built the thing in the first place. You built it. You decide what happens to it. Maybe you're living a version of this. Maybe your lake house is different. Maybe it's a savings account that someone keeps borrowing from without repaying. Maybe it's a house that someone has started treating as their own. Maybe it's your time, your energy, your professional expertise, something you built carefully that someone else has begun to assume is available because you've always made it available. I want you to ask yourself, what have I built that is being treated as though it belongs to someone who did not build it? And what am I waiting for to say, not this time? Final question. When I called Ellen and said, accept the offer and close it before June 24th, when I made that decision, alone, without telling Vivian or Marcus, was I right? Was it too far? Or was it exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, done in exactly the right way? Tell me in the comments. And if this story hit something real, hit the like button. Share it with someone who built something that someone else is starting to treat as theirs. And subscribe, because I'll be here next week. There's a story in the description I think you'll need just as much as this one. I'll see you in the next one.